You open this door with the key of reason. Beyond it is another dimension, a dimension of truth, a dimension of freedom, a dimension of joy. You're moving into the land of both the ideal and the real, of the possible and the actual. You've just crossed over into the Capitalist Corner.
Where reason meets reality, welcome to the Capitalist Corner.
Welcome to the Capitalist Corner. It's Open Question Friday. I'm your host, Michael Liebowitz. I am also the vice chairman of the American Capitalist Party. Our esteemed chairman and co-host of this show, Mr. Mark Pellegrino, is working, so he could not make it today. We're fortunate enough to have the great Jim Valliant. And now that Mark's not here, Jim will give us his honest takes and not just agree with everything Mark says. I kid.
The brilliant and ever correct Mark Pellegrino is with us, but he could be listening on a set someplace.
He could, yeah, he could. We don't know, although he doesn't share the show, so who knows? But
yeah, he does share it to social media.
Yeah. Our normal
share. You want to post it straight from YouTube onto social media.
Yeah, he's having a tough time, man. But just a disclaimer that we are not affiliated with the American Capitalist Party, nor do our views necessarily represent them. But I think we've got some good takes. Jim, oh, by the way, like the program, share the program from YouTube to social media. Check out my podcast, The Rational Egoist. Do it all. Jim, even before I ever took any interest in philosophy at all, as far back as I can even remember, I was very interested in psychology. I even wanted to be a therapist. That was my goal. And I've always been very curious to what motivates people. How do people think? Why do they think that way? And given I don't want to be hyperbolic here, the elevated state of emotions in our political discourse, I've been thinking about what's the difference between those who purport to be on the left and those who purport to be on the right. And I've got a tentative hypothesis, and this is similar in my view to Howard Rourke's, sitting back and saying the principle behind the dean, except for I'm going to share my tentative hypothesis, and I want to get your thoughts on it. It seems to me that the worst elements of the left, of the people who claim to be on the left, and I'm not speaking, and I don't want to have to keep giving this disclaimer, but for both sides, I'm talking about the worst folks, not your average Democrat or your average Republican who's living their lives, votes, even people that are passionate. I'm talking about the worst. And what I'm seeing is the left seems to be far more callous, indifferent, smug might even be the word, whereas the worst elements of the right seem to be very motivated by anger. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are. Before we get to the audience question, that's my question.
Well, I think that there is a better understanding of individual agency in morality on the right. If I had to summarize the point you're trying to make here. And on the other hand, I think that the left has a deeply ingrained tribalist hatred, group hatred. And there are elements of the right who have this. Obviously, these alt-right racists, these alt-right tribalists.
Sure. I mean, these are not neat categories.
They are not neat categories.
That's why I said those who purport to be, because, the horseshoe theory seems to be more and more accurate every day.
More and more accurate. And there is a convergence, a fascist convergence going on, as I've commented on many times, that was long ago predicted by Ayn Rand and Leonard Peikoff, by the way. Boy, did they turn out to be right. There's a total fascist convergence going on. But individual agency is not a concept that really sinks in the left. And they tend to be very religious. It's funny, many that I interact with on the left are formerly religious people because of my other professional concerns, and so I'm talking to ex-Christians or ex-Orthodox Jews, and what's very interesting is they take that that former religion and they reject many elements of it. They tend to become determinists. They tend to become positivist, if people know the philosophical phrase. And that means that individual agency is very much less relevant to them. And so they can praise individual criminals like this Luigi guy who killed the CEO. They can be mawkish about individual agency and crime. But when it comes to big groups, like if you oppose me on this political issue, then you are a heretic, burn them at the stake, do the pogrom, do the mass execution. They are much more like the medieval church in that way. So they still retain this religious dogmatism, these ex-Christians and ex-Jews who moved to the left or were on the left and just threw out their religion and kept their politics. Their politics becomes their religion. And so they become like medieval inquisitors. So I notice a sort of, you would think, a paradoxical thing. These medieval inquisitors with dogmatic views who've substituted their politics for religion on the one hand. And what's a little better on the right is that the right will at least say, well, it's, your life, it's your family, it's your career, it's have something other than politics that motivates you. I find that much more common on the right because they believe that government has a limited role in their lives, and so they tend to believe more. And I do not take this as an endorsement of the new right, but they still.
No, you're all for these guys. Jim Valliant, hero to the right.
They're still deeply wrong, and their retaining of real religion is very often where they go off the rails. Their altruism makes them unable to respond to socialists, for example. But leaving all my other criticisms of the right aside for 1 minute, at least they believe in individual agency. They believe that, well, no, my life is more than politics. And that makes them, in that sense, a little better.
I'll tell you something funny, Jim, that's kind of ironic in a way. In Opar, Leonard Peikoff, and I think Opar came out in 90, right? 1990
or 91.
Yeah. And he says that the conservatives are the worst, right? He said the conservatives are the worst because they get mixed up with capitalism. I disregarded that for so long. I just thought, no, the Republicans are the only shot we got. I changed my mind in 2016. The irony here is that right about the time I was finally convinced by Leonard's arguments, he was going to the other end and saying, no, now it's the left that is worse. But you said
views haven't really changed.
No, and mine haven't either. It's just an analysis of the culture. My policy views and my views of right and wrong have not changed. Just my assessment of the political landscape has changed, of what's going on and who's the danger. And ever since Trump came on, it's been clear to me that Trump and Trump's followers were a bigger danger. Doesn't mean I don't think that your left-wing Obamaites and AOCs aren't. I, of course, do. You know what I mean? But before we get we already got questions come in, but I want to read something and I want to talk to you about this. Now, this was posted to Facebook by somebody that I knew when I was a kid. He's from my town. The people that liked it, hit the like button. I know them. So it hits harder. This is not just some abstract, distant person on social media, right? These are people that I know. And the guy posts and he's commenting on the Charlie Kirk shooting. And he says, I haven't said anything while I try to process the events of the last 2 days. I've learned the hard way to think and pray before I speak. Okay, aside from the praying stuff, I can get along with that. Wait, be patient, right? Wait till things come out.
Yeah.
He said, this is an ironic turning point in the country and the civilized Western world. This is the moment where everyone gets a gut check and shows their true character. Again, I'm okay with that. That seems good.
Yeah.
He says social media has been a mixed bag of good and evil. Okay, I agree. And then he says Charlie Kirk was an amazing young man, love him or hate him. I don't know much about him to assess his character. But then he says a man who wanted to speak on an individual basis who those opposed him, and he was murdered for that. Well, again, we don't yet know why he was murdered. I think it's probable, but we don't know. I'm always like, I just can't. The idea of coming out and baking, how many different people have they thought was the guy? I've seen people posted, Jim, on social media with their names saying this is the guy that did it. They had a picture of a guy that debated him, and they're like, oh, look how similar they look. This is the guy. You do that stuff, you ruin people's lives.
Yeah.
Remember, what was his name? Richard, God, I can't remember.
Jewel?
Richard Jewell. They ruined that guy's life.
Yeah.
By reporting that
and he wasn't at all.
So that's why, even when things, until I know, I don't know. Right. But so anyway, so then he goes, this is a turning point because it shows who's good and who is evil. I'm not a perfect man, but I am a Christian and I can see evil. Here's where it gets nuts. There are demons among us. People I have known my whole life are evil. They are exposing themselves constantly. I'm not trying to convince anyone to follow Jesus. That's not my place. All I can say is my eyes are open and there's only one way to salvation. Get your clicks and likes on social media. I hope it comforts you in eternal damnation. The left, the Democrats, repent now and change your ways. You are the embodiment of evil in this world. You are everything you falsely decry. You make the Nazis look like Girl Scouts. Ugh. I'll pray for you, but you have to change yourselves. Now, what scares me, Jim, here, and this is what scares me about the whole Trump phenomenon from the start. It's what scares me in politics. It scares me on the left, too. The epistemology here is just atrocious. There doesn't have to be any tie between some people's minds and the reality that they describe. They just say things and think that they're saying a truth. Now, once he gets to demons, nobody can prove one statement he made. None. But he goes out there, he puts that on social media as he's criticizing social media. People I know are putting up likes and saying amen to this. One of the guys I've been friends with for over 30 years, and I disagreed with him, and he just started getting vicious with me. And so I had to cut him off. Yesterday, I had coffee with an old friend of mine who's having all kinds of problems because the type of things he's posting. He's a big Trump guy, and he doesn't even understand that there's another view. And he says to me, we've got big problems in this country. And I told him, I said, dude, you don't understand. You're part of the problem. I told him point blank to him, you're not part of the solution. When you post things, quotes from Bob Marley about how our prophets have been killed and we just stand by, and our constitutional rights are in danger because of this, and if you disagree with me, unfriend me now. You're posting that, and when people respond to you angry, he's like, I don't understand. And he's genuine, Jim. He said, I don't understand why they're responding this way to me. Why are they acting like this? And I don't know how you communicate with that. That's going to get us to the question from Robert. But first, I just want to hear some of your commentary on what I've just told you.
Well, obviously, the poor guy's infected by mysticism, and it started with the prayers. It went to the demons, and then it went to the the complete inquisitorial wrath, and that's the way it works. Mind, reason is the answer here, folks. You reject reason as your tool of cognition, which is clearly what he's done here. He's going by his. It's funny. He begins with I paused. I didn't want to come out, and I wanted to think and pray about this. Okay, good. You're please don't start pointing fingers until you've got evidence. Boy, as a former prosecutor, I am just, every time there's a crime and people start making these wild assertions, I think to myself, Jesus, can you just shut up until we actually know something? But no, they never do. Anyway, the problem with mystics in general, on the left or the right, and it doesn't matter whether you're a collectivist mystic who worships society with a capital S or God with a capital G, they're mystics in effect. And once you've abandoned reason, of course, you're going by the emotional seat of your pants. That's what you're reduced to. That's the only thing you've got left. The only faculty that the only compass you've got that's going to guide you is your emotions, because you've tossed out the compass of reason. And obviously that's what's going on here. There is no way to separate the defense of freedom and rights from the defense of reason. people say, well, Ayn Rand, she talks about got this whole big philosophy that, goes into epistemology and the basis of ethics. And why do I need all that crap to understand politics? You need all that stuff to understand politics.
I hope you were going to say all that crap. That would have been great. If you said you need all that crap.
Well, it isn't crap.
No, it's not.
It's the only way we have. It's the only map we have to, chart this terrain. And this guy has torched his map and is now going, on, star signs and the omens of bird flights and stuff, like an ancient mystic. And we may as well be reading animal entrails as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Well, once you give up reason, someone asked this the other day, once you give up reason, there's no point. There's no place to draw the line. There's nothing to guide you on what to put faith in.
Ends for me at that point. It really does. I'll probe it a little bit. I'll probe their real commitment to total mysticism. But once they've said, no, mysticism is going to be my arbiter here. Mysticism is my ruler. Well, sorry, I have something else to do. I have a productive conversation over here that I want to be involved in. I am not going to penetrate all the fortress of psychological defense mechanisms that you've had to build and rationalizations you've had to build around your defense mysticism. So
folks, you've heard it here. When Jim deals with mystics, he will probe them. But he's not trying. Okay, he will probe them, but once he's done, he's moving on to conversation with somebody else. So that's the take here that we've got, right? He doesn't want to penetrate. But he will probe. Okay.
Now you're the one turning this into a Persephone.
No, listen. You and Mark got some. I don't know, man. But listen. So Robert Nasir, not Nasir, not Nazar. Robert Nasir says he has a question. He says, on Sunday, Amy Nasir and I will address the question, in the face of current events, what must be done? And in preparation, we'd love to hear your answer to the question. And Jim, let me just start by saying, Robert, great question, because I've been wondering it myself. And the problem for me is largely what Jim just said, is that once somebody forsakes reason, they don't even have to do it explicitly, because a lot of these people think they're being reasonable. But when you make statements, for instance, like the left, and then you have these all-encompassing statements and attributes, you're not being reasonable. You're taking a statistical category, a label that encompasses so much, and assuming you can condense it into certain worldviews. And the same goes for the right. Or if you're just angry and reacting on emotion. But that seems to be the flavor of the day, Jim. And when I try to talk to people and engage, it just, I don't know. And it scares the hell out of me. People often say to me, like, I've had a lot of people tell me, you get mad when people disagree with you, but they've got me dead wrong. What I get mad at, what sets me off, and I wish it didn't, and I'm not saying it's right, is when I'm having a conversation with somebody who can't obey and doesn't obey the laws of logic, who doesn't adhere to the rules of reason. Because when that happens in a conversation, I start to feel like I'm an animal in a cage, right? I feel trapped, like there's nothing I can do. There's nothing I can appeal to in the other person. People can disagree with me and still make a logical argument. And then it's up to me, if I'm going to show them to be wrong, to address their premises. Because if their logic is correct, but their conclusion's wrong, there's a premise off. Same goes for me, by the way. It's not that I can always have perfect premises, but if I'm following logic, then you'll know, okay, I see, well, here's your premise, which is why you and I can get into arguments for hours and then switch to a different conversation, because we're both following reason. We're just at a different point, or have a slightly different premise.
There are perfectly rational points where reasonable minds can disagree. And that's part of reason. Part of reason, the thing is, it's not automatic. It requires a certain method. It requires a certain context. There are things we can't know if we don't have certain information. And so, the question is, what is your method? There are people on the left who really pride themselves in their scientific reasoning, and they may be dead wrong about politics, but I can have a conversation with them. There are people on the right, even religious people on the right. They're kind of they're influenced by Thomism, and they say, no, I can do this all by reason, and I can establish all my premises by reason. And if that's the way it's not like that poster, for example. That's a sharp contrast to this poster, who say, no, Jim, I'm willing to, I can do reason with you. I can do logic with you. That'll be the only way we do this. Okay, I can have a conversation with the Thomist religious right guy, just as I can have a conversation, even with, say, what did I call him the other minute ago, the positivist leftist guy, so long as they're at least committed in theory. And I'll be generous as I can be about because I have a very particular understanding of reason, but I'll be as generous as I can be in walking into it and having that conversation. But once someone there is no honest rejection of reason. Let me just repeat that. There is no honest rejection of reason. To reject reason is to embrace dishonesty. And that's why instead of getting irritated, what I do is I just turn them off in the same way they've turned off their own mind. And I realize there's no way, it's hopeless. You've hit a brick wall that cannot be gone around, gone over, gone through.
So, but Jim, Robert's looking for, what to do. And the problem is, if I'm already talking to people that are reasonable, then I know what to do. But the problem is you have to get through to people who aren't committed to reason. And I don't know.
Fool's quest there, my friend.
But then how do we ever change the culture or change the dynamics?
Those folks are self-defined social ballast, as Ayn Rand called them. They are useless. They're worthless. They are meaningless in the historical long term. Understand that by rejecting reason, it's either we're in they're part of a tidal wave that will wash civilization away, and there's nothing you can do about that tidal wave. It's like a force of nature because they have shut off their volitional capacity. Now the world is the deterministic world of the positivist, let's say, because they've shut off reason. Now deterministic forces will take over the course of history and the course of their own lives. Or they're the rational minority, and history is always made by a small minority. The people who truly influence and push history forward are those who are committed to reason. So if you're committed to reason, then you are among the potential minority who might actually shape the future. And the future is shaped by a minority. Believe me, the philosophical controversies of one age will become the common sense of the next. And people don't even realize how philosophy controls their own psychology or the course of history. But if someone says, I reject reason, I am unable to persuade them. There's nothing that will get through to them. They are completely impenetrable. That's that. It truly is. Now, I can point out that fact. I can point out reason is your only means of knowing. And what you've done is I can compare it. I can make all the comparisons I want in the world to them, chucking it in, and compare them to medieval inquisitors who tortured and burned people at the stake for slightly heretical views in Christian Europe just a few centuries ago. You could point out all those things, but if they are impervious to fact and reason, it is a fool's errand to even try to persuade them, because you can't. You're never going to do it. It's hopeless. Move on to the next person who might actually be open to persuasion, if what you want to do is persuade. But they basically relegated themselves to being caroms on a board. They've reduced themselves to being, some flotsam and jetsam in the determinist flow of history, and by their own choice, they have chosen to be inactive parts of the progress of human thought or the flow of human civilization. They are now just flotsam and jetsam by their own choice.
So Ayn Rand fan club says lots of lefties say Ayn Rand was a fascist. It's interesting because I once read an article by such a leftist, and this person's a leftist. He's a leftist professor. He was writing for Jacobin magazine, and he said Mises was a fascist, and he had to say some things about Ayn Rand. So I had him on the show to debate him, and the problem with him wasn't just the misattribution. He was just wrong on facts.
Yeah.
Like he was, and I pointed out, and he's like, oh no, I didn't say that. I'm like, dude, I got it right here. You know what I mean? But this is the interesting thing to me, is even though he was shown to be wrong on many of his claims, there was never any change of mind. Like, there was never any piece written that says, you know what, I got this wrong. Like, I also debated another leftist, Michael Mechanic, the editor of Mother Jones magazine, about generational wealth. And he was wrong about so many of his claims. And at the end, it was clear, he had been beaten. But he didn't come back and say, you know what, I was wrong about this. That type of thing disturbs me, Jim.
There are objectivists who will not change their mind when confronted with facts, are not interested in facts. They call themselves objectivists. Believe it or not, once a person has staked out a public position, you have now a psychological thing kicks in. Once a person has staked out a public position, it takes the extraordinarily rare, honest, virtuous person to say, you know something, I was wrong. Let me just say right now, I got it wrong. I'm sorry. Now I'm going to go out of my way to tell the truth. I myself, in my own personal history, I was wrong about libertarianism when I was a teenager. I associated with people that in retrospect, I think to myself, well, it's interesting that I associated with them, but boy, was I confused. I didn't really understand objectivism. I didn't really understand philosophy in general. Not until I started really seriously studying with Leonard Peikoff did I get my head straight on that. But I wrote a whole book. To get off my soul, off my chest, the way I sanctioned and furthered, say, the work of Nathaniel Branden. I had to say, look, I'm sorry that I sponsored his speech, The Benefits and Hazards of the Law. I was the one who introduced him. I put on that first, when he gave the benefits and hazards, I arranged it. I got the auditorium, the seats. I introduced him. I asked the questions from the audience. I interviewed him for publication. I had no real idea who this guy was. And so in my mind, I think it's not sufficient for me simply to change inside. I've got to say something out loud. I was wrong in my praise of my personal endorsement. Now, does Nathaniel Branden have a lot of valuable things to say in his early books on psychology? Yes, I think so. That does not change the fact that I gave the guy a personal endorsement, and his criticism of Rand, I helped sanction. So what do? I have to go take affirmative steps to correct my error, is the way I thought about it to myself. And there are very few people who are willing to do that. There are very few people who call themselves objectivists who are willing to look at facts that might be uncomfortable. They'll just blank out. No, don't. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. That is obviously anti-objectivist. It's as evil as rank mysticism, but there's a psychological factor. Once you've taken a public position on something, it is really hard to say, I got it wrong. I'm sorry. I now see the truth. And that psychology, believe it or not, exists among many so-called objectivists.
You speak of being wrong. When you and I debate the Constitution, and this has to do with one of the articles I sent you, I take a strict originalist perspective.
You're a conservative.
I am. I think that the Constitution should be interpreted based on the meaning that it had at the time. There's one area, though, where I have a real difficulty with that position.
Well, you're going to have difficulties with that position.
There's only one, and don't get smug with me, Valliant, because I think your position's got far more difficulties.
This is the ball busting show. Okay?
Yes, no, that's okay. I did it back. You have to be able to take what you, whatever. You know the saying. Speaking of ball busting, Pellegrino couldn't be show up because he's working, but that's not stopping him from texting me while I'm on the air. Yeah, but so anyways, the article on the Second Amendment, and when it comes to, the thing is at the time, the meaning of arms that were bared didn't include, for instance, machine guns, let alone nuclear bombs and grenades. So the question is,
how free speech included the internet or radio and television.
But I see. No, I don't know. Don't drive me into that area because I think you're wrong there. But when it comes to the guns. weapons, to the things that you can carry, even if you say it just has to do with bearable arms, so you can do away with nuclear weapons. Okay, well, what about rocket launchers? What about grenade launchers?
Yeah.
And I would say, well, that seems ridiculous, but to get there, you have to go beyond the scope in the language of the Second Amendment. And there was recently this case, and this is a segue to get you to talk about the recent case. And it's in Connecticut, where I live, where they've banned a certain type of rifle, semi-automatics. They banned semi-automatic weapons in Connecticut. And according to the author of the article, it's in clear violation of the Heller decision. The Heller, which said we have an individual right to carry.
Yes.
Connecticut is the big Democratic state. The Democrats in both chambers in the assembly, Democrat and the governor, judges appointed by Democrats. So it doesn't surprise me, but it seems like it's so obviously wrong. I'm just eager to get your take on it.
Well, the Supreme Court, way back when the 14th Amendment was adopted, immediately gutted it. One of the sad truths about the great amendment that happened at the end of the Civil War, which was supposed to ensure equal rights to all Americans, especially the newly freed slaves, but they didn't limit it to newly freed slaves. They said they imposed new restrictions on the states. The original Bill of Rights only applied against the federal government. Your right to freedom of religion, freedom of speech, all that. That was Congress. That was only a limitation on the federal government. It wasn't the states could get away with all kinds of things that were inconsistent with the Bill of Rights. The 14th Amendment was meant to change all of that. And so they included a privileges and immunities clause, an equal protection clause, a due process clause that could apply against the states, giving federal courts jurisdiction to constitutionally review state matters. The framers of the 14th Amendment believed that now the Bill of Rights was applicable against the states. So if the states violated your freedom of speech or freedom of religion under the Bill of Rights, now federal courts could knock down those state laws. Well, the slaughterhouse cases gutted the privileges and immunities clause almost from out of the chute. By the 1890s, Plessy versus Ferguson had basically gutted the Equal Protection Clause. Through the course of the 20th century, the Bill of Rights was finally starting to be applied, but piece by piece, in an individual piecemeal way. Starting in the 20s, free speech, and by the 40s, it was clear free speech was now applicable through the Due Process Clause, a vehicle not intended for that purpose under the 14th Amendment. But at least during the course of the 20th century, nearly every element of the Bill of Rights, and it took decade after decade because they were doing it in a piecemeal way, got applied against the states through the 14th Amendment. It was only in the 21st century, really, that the Second Amendment was addressed. And America's had such a liberal approach to guns, it really didn't come up until the latter decades of the 20th century, gun control. But once gun control started happening, then of course the Second Amendment was headed to the Supreme Court. And when it got to the Supreme Court said in the famous Heller case, you have an individual right to self-defense, which includes the right to bearable arms. And they weren't, we've already had the case law on the stun gun. Someone said, well, wait a minute, there were no stun guns in the 1700s. The Supreme Court said, yeah, but it's a bearable arm. And as with any other right, it is the abstraction that counts here, not the current technology, whether it's freedom of speech or weapons, you name it. So the Supreme Court's already plowed this ground. It can be a new weapon, a newly invented kind of weapon. That's not what this turns on. Stun guns are part of your individual right to bear arms, bearable arms, that's true. But they said weapons in common use are surely within this. That's what this case is changing. It's changing the idea that commonly used weapons are cool, because if it's commonly used out there by the bad guys, my right to self-defense has to include weapons that are commonly used and bearable. That is to say, obviously, if it's artillery, it's not bearable, so that's out right there. Instead, they've imposed a new standard, which I think is a bit more subjective. Dangerousness, unusually dangerous weapons, is now what they're trying to add. It does alter Heller by adding a new and different element and a different standard by which we measure what weapons come within the protection of the Second Amendment, if that makes sense. So this is no doubt going to be headed to
That's my next question.
maybe even the Supreme Court will have to come in and revisit the standard that they've been developing over the last 20 years. But it's not only a federal right. There was a DC case that established that. That's Heller. Then there was state law that it was applied to, even New York's gun licensing regime now. So the Second Amendment, like the other Bill of Rights, applies against the states. And one of the delightful things is one of those gun cases, Clarence Thomas actually cited the Privileges and Immunities Clause. Bless his heart. So I like the jurisprudence in general that the Supreme Court has issued on the Second Amendment and the individual right to bear arms, the individual right to self-defense. I think is a good thing. Now, does that mean that it isn't open to constant review and adjustment? And maybe there are bearable arms that are so wickedly dangerous. You point out like RPGs or something like that, which can easily be carried around, or maybe something you have on your shoulder, like a bazooka or something. There could be dangerous. What if I have a poison gas or bioweapon in a grenade? That's totally a bearable arm. I understand that. But I don't think that would be viable because their existing standard says in common use. I don't think bioweapon grenades are in common use.
I'll tell you what I think. I think that Persephone needs to get on this. We need some merch with a picture of Jim Valliant carrying a bazooka. I think that would be wonderful. Let me just comment on something real quick here, because I got this shirt. I wore my t-shirt. I have a real problem. This is my Declaration of Independence shirt. I forget what shirts I wear, and I don't want to be wearing the same shirt 2 days in a row coming on here, or even, one day I wear one and then the next, and I'm always wearing the same stuff.
You don't have a wardrobe budget for the show?
Oh, what? Geez. No, I got a bunch of shirts in a drawer. They're not even neat.
What you do is you get a sponsor, like, one of these men's suits outfits, and they'll just do a little sponsor ad, and they'll put you in a nice fancy suit just for giving them a little ad. You gotta get savvy if you're out there in the internet.
Savvy, Jim. I've just learned how to log into YouTube. About getting savvy. So Ian Gilmore asks if we saw Alex Naresta's article on politically motivated violence. He researched and breaks down the numbers, and the right has committed more both over the last 50 years and the last 5 years. I haven't seen it. I do highly respect Alex Naresta, though. I like him a lot. I've interviewed him. I've seen him debate. He's a very smart guy, and if that's what he's reporting, I have no reason to doubt it. I got to say, though, the only reason that this even matters to me is because of all the claims that are being made out there about how it's only the left that ever engages in political violence. Actually. Other than that, I think the whole idea, it's them. It's just the tribal finger pointing. It's the other side. It's the other.
Bernie Sanders had to get this. I am no socialist, but Bernie Sanders actually was sane and rational in his comments about Charlie Kirk. Now, there are other people, and everyone who's on social media knows that there's an army of leftists out there. I mean, I had one friend on social media who actually said Charlie Kirk put his own head in the news. Oh, God, man. That is just so wrong and off base. And it shouldn't matter which side is motivating it. The discussion ends with violence. I've been posting on social media Ayn Rand's wonderful quotes on this. Once you've initiated force, discussion over. It is inappropriate and unnecessary to discuss the issues involved, the excuses, justifications, whatnot. It's over. You used force. Now I don't even want to hear your reasons. I don't even want to hear your excuses. There's no further discussion of the issue. You used force. And it doesn't matter. There's obvious. I can't give you a statistical comparison on and it would depend. See, I think a lot of this depends on what we define as right-wing versus left-wing violence. If there are many conservatives who say, well, if it's racist, it's not right-wing, and there are many on the left who say, well, if the guy's an overt, communist, it's not. That doesn't necessarily mean it's on the left. And I appreciate that, gentlemen. And it goes to the point that you can't treat this in a tribalistic way. When you use that pronoun they, and that is really what's awful. They killed Charlie Kirk. Whoa.
Yes.
Whoa,
Oh my
whoa,
God,
whoa,
I
whoa,
hate
whoa,
that.
whoa, 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 whoa. Hold the phone. Now, you can talk about the political climate. You can talk
Sure.
about the context, but even people who said hateful things, I mean, truly rotten things, they weren't the ones who got on that roof and shot the guy. Okay, you have to distinguish between the actual user of violence and someone who's, say, contributing to an atmosphere of hatred. There's a big sharp difference there. Words are words and violence is violence. Now, do certain words make the culture, encourage people in the culture to engage in violence? Yes. The Supreme Court in the 20th century, about the Supreme Court, they wrestled back and forth. Communists call for the violent overthrow of the United States government. Is that enough for the law to come in and start regulating what you call for the violent overthrow of the US government? By the time we got to the Brandenburg decision in 1969, where incitement to violence was properly, in my view, much more objectively and correctly defined than it ever had been before, did we get a good universal, more objective standard with Brandenburg. It has to immediately incite violence. Okay, otherwise your speech is protected and even your verbal advocacy of violence is protected. Isn't that interesting? So while I would condemn the communist is absolutely encouraging chaos and violence and so forth with his words. They are still just words until and unless he is actually is saying, let's go beat that guy up over there, and gets the angry mob to actually go over there and beat the guy up. So we still have these important distinctions that we have to make. I will condemn the communist for advocating violence. Is the communist in part helping to create an atmosphere of violence that encourages? Yes, absolutely. And so I will combat words with more words. But and when the guy pulls out the gun, now we pull out our guns, but only when he pulls out the guns or incites the violence. So those distinctions are absolutely critical. And looking at it in terms of they killed Charlie Kirk, or they are the ones who made, you'll hear it on the left too. They are the ones who speak such hateful things. Someone said, the question was asked on social media yesterday. Someone said, well, Charlie Kirk deserved it because of his divisive rhetoric. Can someone define what divisive rhetoric is for me?
They cannot.
Well, my response was eloquent disagreement.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah, that was great.
Thank you. I thought it was clever too, if I do say so myself.
So my favorite right-wing tribalist, the Ayn Rand fan club, said the left can cherry pick stats showing socialism is better for the economy. The problem, he's saying that in relation to Alex, is Alex Naresta is not a leftist. So your first is off. Secondly, he's a brilliant economist. He has no reason to come to that conclusion. He's not going to sabotage his reputation as a Cato scholar to make some juvenile political point. That's not what he's doing. But the fact that you would even start to assume that is just indicative of everything that we're talking about. The tribalism is just
exactly. I would
terrible.
In fact, you know what the morally and epistemologically responsible thing to do here, questioner? Go read his article. Go check out. If you find something wanting, if something not, maybe he is being vague in his definitions. Maybe he's got his statistics wrong. Why don't you go check it out? Because maybe, just maybe, your mind will expand and learn about right-wing violence.
No. They wrote an article.
They
did. They wrote an article.
My novelist buddy with whom I wrote Creating Christ, he wrote a wonderful novel in which this science fiction novel in which there's this sci-fi species is confronted, and he's the ultimate individualists, and the humans are explaining to the species, we went to the moon, we invented electric light, we developed antibiotics, and he said, you did that? You did that? Oh, wow, how cool. No, I meant we as a species. Oh, you didn't do that. You mean Thomas Edison did the light bulb? You mean someone else discovered antibiotics? Neil Armstrong walked on the moon, and these scientists developed the light bulb. Oh, okay. Let's identify the individuals involved. There is no collective brain, and looking at this in a tribalistic way. I don't care whether it's capital S society that you're substituting for capital G God. It's still mysticism. Collectivism is mysticism. Whether you break it down by race, you break it down by nationality, you break it down by whatever irrelevant factor it is that puts you into some intersectional group or some subsectional group, that's collectivism. You don't blame someone for, where you can draw the line in guilt by association is an objective thing. Did they endorse and sanction this particular thing? Were they the ones who actually said or did this particular thing? Look to the individuals involved. Only individuals think. Only individuals really act. There is no group, tribe, etc. There's Michael and Jim and Scott and it's just those individuals. That's the only reality.
That's all there is. There's no more. Just Michael and Scott and Jim.
No. They're the individuals, and that's why I use those.
and is our substitute for individuals.
But the point is, only individuals have reality. All those other things are abstractions. Okay, and they can instantly become floating abstractions when you start waving them around like they killed Charlie Kirk. Jesus.
Well, Jim, they want to know if you're writing another book.
Yeah.
Actually, Race Jacobson wants to know.
I have a couple of book projects that I'm slowly working on when I have the time. I've been so damn busy in the last year or two. I mean, incredibly and increasingly busy. I need to work I'll tell you, what I need help with is my time management. You know, I'm not as energetic as I was when I was younger, so it's becoming all the more urgent that I get good with my time management. But I'm active on, as you hear, on podcasts and stuff. I'm active doing other things that are constantly taking me away from what I would rather do, write a big grand book on religion, right? People have encouraged me to write a memoir. I think I might do that as totally.
I got to make an appearance in it. If you write a memoir at this point, I got to be in there.
Oh, you would be in it there, Michael.
And they also want to know if they can send you money.
You can always send me money. I take 10s, 20s, 5s, 1s. You can even send me quarters if you want.
He doesn't need a Patreon account. Just send them to me. Send the money. And I'll make sure that it catches up with him somehow. He'll get it eventually. I am going out there. I'm headed to San Diego.
The real issue for me isn't money. It's time. Time is way more precious in one sense. There's a value to time, no doubt. And you can actually even measure it, as Mises pointed out, time reference and stuff. Menger and Mises were really great on this point. So you can actually measure the value of time in certain senses and contexts. But my problem is time, not money.
I was told that Greg Lewis asked a great question, but I really don't understand the question. He said, so aside from a Swiss watch, what is a movement? Well, I don't get it.
Well, I think he means intellectual or cultural movement.
But what's the Swiss watch?
People who are animated by the same idea. So what a movement would be is a group of people who advocate and want to forward a common idea or set of ideas.
Lee said, Jim, you're so cute. She also thought that you should write a gay romance novel. So whatever, but
a gay romance novel.
Yes.
I just don't think I have it in me to do that.
So, okay. The gears in a watch are referred to as a movement. Thank you, Ian Gilmore. Robert Naser says, what differentiates between a worthwhile, effective movement versus self-indulgent waste of time, energy, and resources? I'd love to hear your answer to this, Jim.
Wow. Well, I think you have to have specific concrete goals. I think you want to keep your long-term goals in mind, but in the meantime, you have to develop rational intermediate goals. There was a psychologist once who really put this in an individual context very well. You want your stretch goals, and you want your immediate getting there goals, the steps on which you're going to get there. Think it through. Think through what your ultimate goal is. Keep your ultimate goal in mind, But what a lot of people do, and I think this is a very common error in every movement, is they want to skip ahead. They want to skip all the causal steps that are going to be necessary in the meantime to get to that ultimate long-term goal. So I think it's the development of clearly defined, reasonable to achieve within your context and lifespan, intermediate goals. If we could just accomplish this or this educationally, and even politically, if we could accomplish this one thing on this issue, that would be an important. So what we need to do is be very careful about selecting the issues that we want to highlight. Make it the poster child issue that'll help crack you into other issues. So say on a political level. So what you need to do is you need to have good, realistic, reachable goals in the meantime, intermediate goals that help you get to your ultimate long-term goal. Because if you try and skip the process, all those intermediate goals, you're never going to get to the ultimate goal. Worthwhile, as opposed to just, jerking off, wasting your time. The point is that, a lot of people do that when it comes to their big idealistic goals. They end up wasting a lot of their time, getting frustrated with, let's go back to what we were talking about earlier. Immediately tune out those mystics. If they've shut off reason, there's no getting to them. And so if you're going to keep banging your head against the wall, trying to get through to a mystic, look, they have to make the choice. I believe in human volition. To think is an act of choice. They've got to take the effort of thought inside. They've got to turn up the dimmer switch, as we've called free will and other discussions. They're the ones who have to take the effort to turn on the dimmer switch. And there's nothing you can do to change that. They are agents. They are volitional agents, and you've got to treat them as such. And a lot of people waste their time trying to convince people who have rendered themselves, as I say, social ballast. In any case, focus on where you can be productive, where you can make a difference, where you can make a change. That's the best advice I can offer at this point.
I would even say, though, Jim, that while I think that ends are important, the process is important as well. Because you can have a goal and never achieve it doesn't mean it's a waste of time, because the process that you go through, the growth that you have, the experiences, it can all make it worthwhile. I got to tell you, let me just say, I love that I can watch Persephone, because her facial expressions in regard to some of the comments are just classic. I wish you could see it, Jim. It's very, very amusing. Of course, Scott Schiff has already come to the fore to say that Alex's study is BS. And he's just defending his lefty buddies. All right, I guess that Alex Naresta is just some lefty that's against taxation. I don't know.
He's an unusual lefty
that carries carries this copy of the Constitution around with him. That's whatever. But
by using labels like that, what we do is we shut ourselves off from opportunities to learn. We really do. It's really, really vital that we go check out what the guy said. Are you telling me, a wise philosopher once told me the best way to persuade someone is not to tell them, to yell at them all the things that you know to be true. No, what you want to do is let's find out what makes that guy tick. Why did that guy believe what he believes? Get at that, probe that. Ask him. You're never going to learn if you just stick in your own bubble and only read. And I presume here you're only reading traditional conservatives. You wouldn't read a libertarian, or you wouldn't read a leftist. No, you're not going to grow. You're not going to learn, and your own argumentation will get dull and repetitive and ineffective. How are you ever going to reach that leftist? How are you ever going to reach that libertarian if you don't check out why he's saying what he's saying, even if it's wrong? I don't know the study. So sight unseen, I don't know. Maybe he is wrong. But how are you ever going to learn and respond if you don't go check it out yourself? I don't get it. The way to be effective is to read your opponent. Try and figure out what makes him tick. Why did he come to the belief that he did? In most cases, he had some real reason. Now, it may be psychological or emotional or something, but the only way to ferret out the reason why he believed what he believed is to try and sincerely understand what brought him to that place. You think, well, he's evil. He's already saying something rotten. He's a bastard. I'm not even going to read it. Well, you're just setting up blinders for yourself, and you're going to become less and less effective at persuading anybody but your own little echo chamber.
It's interesting. I remember, reading economics, I frequently came across, references to John Maynard Keynes. So I decided I needed to read John Maynard Keynes. So I went and I got his general theory of interest, employment, and money. I read the Keynes-Hayek debates. I made sure to do that. Ayn Rand frequently mentioned, and Leonard Peikoff frequently mentioned, Critique of Pure Reason, Immanuel Kant. So I said, well, I better get this. I can't just believe what they're saying. I've got to check it. So I went and bought it, read through it twice. It was excruciating.
Excruciating.
Oh my God. It was tough. But same with, whether it be Rene Descartes, Plato. The day I ordered Barry Goldwater's book, The Conscience of a Conservative, I ordered Paul Krugman's book, The Conscience of a Liberal. I've made it a point to read critiques of Ayn Rand, whatever, because
of course.
You have to do that.
I've gone out of my way over the last 45 years to reach out to every person who at one point I was familiar with everything ever published about Ayn Rand, pro, con, negative, hateful, you name it. There was not a critic of Ayn Rand that I didn't want to check out. If you are an objectivist, if you like Ayn Rand, depending on what how much she's influenced you or whatever, that to the extent she has influenced you is, let me advise, the extent to which you should check out her critics. I'm not saying they're honest. I'm just saying it's better for you. Your tools will, your toolbox will have sharper tools. Believe me, if you know what the enemy is saying, why they're saying it, and you steel man their argument. I'm not a big fan of the contemporary philosopher Daniel Dennett, but he has all kinds of great advice in this regard. When you're debating someone, the first step is to state their position so fairly, so accurately, that they would say, geez, I wish I'd put it that way. Then and only then are you really in a position to debate that guy. Figure out a position and state but don't straw man him, steel man him. Steel man him so hard that he would say, Jesus, you just formulated my position. I wish I'd put it that way. Now you're in a position to debate the guy. And frankly, I would say then, really, and only then, are you in a position to debate the guy.
Well, that was well said. We're pretty much out of time here. Maybe I can shower you with praise.
Yes.
Jim Valliant, you are wonderful. Jim, just to say something here quickly. When I come back out there, I'm wondering if we can go to the San Diego Zoo this time around. Would you be interested? Because last time we missed it. We went to that great park. What's the name of that park we went to?
Balboa Park.
San Diego Park.
The great city urban parks in the country. It really does.
Yeah, I feel like I feel like I just saw so much wonderful stuff, but I did not see the San Diego Zoo, and I think they have a panda.
They do too. Yes.
And I'm dying to see a panda.
Great gorilla exhibit. They've got some of their exhibits are some of the finest in the world when it comes to zoos and stuff. So yeah.
My only concern is I may actually try to play with it, and that could be dangerous.
I
can't. Like, how do you not just want to play with a panda?
Well,
or a koala? A koala? Like, would you? I'd love to play with a koala.
Any wild animal, even if it's a small, slow leaf-eating thing in a eucalyptus tree like a koala bear.
What? Ian Gilmore says panda are the most pathetic of the animals. Ian Gilmore, I got to disagree. Have you seen a three-toed sloth, sir? Come on. I'd like wallabies, but I'll tell you, I would absolutely love to have a honey badger.
Ooh, those sound dangerous.
They are dangerous, but they're awesome.
A badass pet, I'm sure, but
I don't know. But okay, let's get the capitalist thought of the day from Jim Valliant, and then we can move on.
Force and mind are opposites. The reason why capitalism is to be advocated is because it liberates the human mind. The human mind is the source of all values, all human progress. Anything good we got because we are a rational creature. And the defense of capitalism has to be the defense of the conditions of rational thought. And that is social freedom. Violence is the opposite of that. Violence is the opposite of that. Whether it comes from the right or it comes from the left, the one thing you know is they're enemies of capitalism if they think force is a correct solution to any social problem.
Well, that was quick, to the point, and spot on. Jim, we'll do you the honor of telling us where people could find you, because they certainly seem to. This chat is out of control. Persephone is writing things that are just should not be seen by people. It's out of control. Jim, where can people find you?
Oh, I'm active on Facebook. I'm also an occasional guest on The Rational Egoist. If you guys know this program, you should really all be aware of The Rational Egoist. You can find me over there sometimes, but almost every day I'm on social media, Facebook especially, James Valliant, answering questions. If you have any question, please hit me up over there.
Awesome. And we got a great weekend ahead of us, people. Remember, like, share from YouTube to your social media, subscribe to the show, check out The Rational Egoist. We should have some good episodes coming out next week. And pretty soon I'll be recording with Jim. I've got a great idea for a show, and I'm going to tell him about it when we go offline. But until then, in the words of the great Mark Pellegrino, remember to always check your premises. Oh, and peace.
Yeah.